So do you focus, it seems like you focus on coaching all different types of businesses?
Yeah, anyone that wants it. And,
Hmm.
there's always this special snowflake syndrome is what I call it. I learned the special snowflake from a Zingerman's trainer, and I've always remembered it. Everybody thinks that this is born in manufacturing, and I'm not a manufacturer, and my company's different, and my
Yeah.
people are smarter, or my people won't understand it, or my people don't speak English. All the barriers that people throw up as to why it can't work in their company, they all think they're a special snowflake. No, if you've got a profit and loss or income statement, you can play the great game, whether you're a bank, a government body, a school, a nonprofit, any industry, it can be done.
That's fantastic. I like what you just said there. If you have a P&L, a bank statement, you can play the great game. I guess that's every business in the world.
Yep.
So then that leads me into the next thing is what is the best type of company? Like when is it most successful? Like what type of company or what characteristics in the team do you see that, you really hit it out of the park with these companies? What type of companies are those?
When does it work best? Yesterday. People always say I have to clean up my books before we're ready. I have to do this. I'm doing this. No, just do it. Just dive in. The water's fine. Jump in. It'll make it better from day one. Now, the second part of your question is that what companies are the best? Typically, I found that ones that have a pretty good culture, because cultures, sure, the great game brings a certain culture,
Mhm.
but if there's a certain culture already established where there's some trust, where people get along with each other, then it just magnifies it. Doesn't mean you have to have that culture, but
Mhm.
that amplifies and quickens the return on the investment.
Yeah. So my next question was going to be like, have you ever had a company like fail or not do so well? And I guess it's the opposite of that. If you have, not as good of a culture or toxic culture and you have to kind of turn over employees, but what would you say like a negative example or a failure would be in terms of your history with the great game?
Well, two couple things. There's a lot in that one to unpack.
Yeah.
Um, One of the principles of the great game is failure is fine as long as it strengthens. Okay, and I don't like using the term lose or losing or loser. Or in the great game, our trainer Michelle Bridges taught me this: there are wins and there are opportunities to learn.
Yeah.
So there's no failures or no losses. There's opportunities to learn. Secondly, yes, I've had two companies where it didn't work as well as it could have. The one company, I worked with them hard for 2 years. We incepted, we did level 2, we did level 3, and it took us 2 years to uncover a top leader that wasn't bought in. Pretty big company in different cities and whatnot. They were the chief of one city.
Mm-hmm.
He'd pay lip service to the great game in our meetings on our design team. Then he'd go back to his little fiefdom and run a command and control like he always used to, and blame that geographic area's shortcomings on too much overhead and time spent on the great game.
Mm-hmm.
That was early in my career, and I didn't sniff it out as well as I could have.
Mm-hmm.
And then once I did, I begged and pleaded with the owner that something's got to be done. The owner, heart of gold, but not as direct as he could have been. Let's just use direct as a term. Brought in speakers to help with the culture. Spent tons of money on it instead of going and sitting down with a guy and saying, "Hey, look, this is what's going on. This is what needs to change. And if it doesn't, you're out of here." And just about every great game company, when they go to great game, loses a couple people, 1, 2, 4, 10, because it's just not in their DNA. They're closer to retirement and thinking about the end game rather than the next new innovation. 55, 60 plus, and I'm not trying to age discriminate or any of that stuff, but they're, changing at that age is a lot different than changing in your 20s, 30s, 40s.
So they're just resistant to change. Usually that's the mentality.
They just want to play out the string. So that was one where it didn't work as well as it could have.
Mm-hmm.
Now we were tackling a lot. That was in the construction industry, which is a little tough, but
Mm-hmm.
can be done, has been done. And there was union people involved, which is another challenge. But once again, they had a P&L, so we could figure it out. The other one was a manufacturing company or process company, manufacturing type. And they did so well the first year that the owner raised the bar on the bonus by a pretty good increment for year 2. They came up short because of this, that, the other thing. So by like May, they knew they weren't making a bonus for the year. So he changed the rules basically. Sure, you can change your bonus, your stake in the outcome, gain share goal every year, but he increased it by 20% or so where they had to get to achieve a bonus.
Oh, wow.
That's pretty significant.
So it was demotivating. It goes back to what we were talking about yesterday with the gain share and how to build it properly.
Yep.
Awesome. So then what are some stories
So
that
I'm sorry, Nick, sorry to interrupt, but
no, go ahead.
where I've seen it struggle is when
Yeah.
the top leaders aren't on board and into it to win it, and they hold on to things. They resist the change. So it's not the frontline people that don't jump on board. It's when leadership doesn't jump on board, their people don't come with them.
Well, that makes a lot of sense because they have, I guess, in their minds, the leadership has something to lose, whereas the frontline workers are only looking at, this could be better for us.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's when the egos come in, and there can't be egos, right? The mother of modern leadership, Sarah Parker Follett, back in the 20s and 30s. Just imagine that. 10 years after women were given the right to vote, she's the mother of modern leadership. The number one goal of leaders is to create more leaders.
Huh.
Okay. She came up with so many simple principles. And if leaders aren't willing to share their secrets to elevate those that they're responsible for, what are we doing? Is that a job security? Are they insecure about their job?
Mm-hmm.
If nobody can replace them, how are you going to grow into the next role? How are you going to advance?
Yeah,
Sorry.
it's like an illusion, and they can only go one way eventually.
Oh, it was Mary Parker Follett. Sorry, Mary Parker Follett.
No, I never heard of her actually. I read a lot, but I never heard of her. So then, so that goes back to the first step, and that's why it's the first step is start with the right leadership.
Yep.
And why they kind of harped on that first step in our coaching certification so much. Because if you don't have the right leadership or the right mentality and they don't have those characteristics, then to that degree, you're going to struggle.
Yeah. And I want to be 60 this month, and I don't have to do this. So I've turned down contracts where I rooted out that it was going to be a struggle with the leadership.
Yeah.
Where the owner might not have been in it for the right reasons, where they weren't willing to be vulnerable and humble and become a servant leader. They just didn't have the courage to do that. I'm like, it's not worth the struggle for me. At first, I'd take them on and stuff because it was a challenge. We win the challenge, and that was great. Now it's, I'd rather be with people who really want it.
Right. That makes sense. Going downstream.
Yep.
So then what about stories that you had of like the greatest successes with the great game? Anything stand out to you and, specifics about those stories?
I have two that are really my buddies. They're my people. One is Hildebrand's Tree Tech in West Texas, Lubbock, Texas. And, no joking about are there trees in West Texas because it is kind of desolate, oil fields, cotton fields. But yeah, there's trees. When Casey invested in us, they were barely doing 7 figures, right around there. And they invested in us because Casey really believed in it. And at the time, boy, he was 35 years old. He built the company out of college, took a job in corporate America and really didn't like it. Couldn't stand it, in fact. So then his dad had been in the tree service and he had worked with his dad. His dad was with a pretty big outfit. So he just decided one day to start his own. All right. So here we come with the great game. They were at 7.5% EBITDA. The first year of playing great game, they were at 22.5%. Triple profit. Casey knew that if everybody understood what they did impacted the financials of the company and their future, incredible. He also did a pretty good split on the gain share or bonus. He wanted to give 70% to his employees of the over. So once you hit your threshold, he wanted to give 70%. Because I think I told you yesterday, those are the guys in the hot West Texas sun or the freezing cold winds in the winter out there doing the work. And he wanted them to see some of the biggest checks they've ever seen with their name on it. All right, flash forward to, I think I started with Casey 2018, 2019. They were in a leased shared yard with 2 other businesses that was just in crappy condition. Over the course of these 4 years, they bought their own land with their own buildings with plenty of room to grow. Now they're doing 3 million-ish, and the EBITDA is still up there. I don't know if it's quite the 22.5% of the first year, but I know it's still in the teens. Amazing. So that kind of growth in 3-4 years from $1 million to $3 million and keeping the EBITDA and getting your own land and their own yard was huge for them.
That's a great story. The
second story is Ryan Lawn and Tree, based in Kansas City, but they have, I think, six operations, 6 cities, 5 states. Each of those operations has 5 different divisions of what they do. It's outdoor care. SOP company, when we started, stock price was 900 or 990 in 2017, 2018. It's over $2,700 today. So their employee owners realized the 300% gain, all right, by playing the great game. It was the owner's want or dream or aspiration to get to 100 million by 2030, all right? And all the vice presidents and the branch managers would kind of roll their eyes when he would say 100 million by 20. That was Larry's dream. That was Larry's vision. Once we dug into the work together in the high involvement planning and strategy side, the team really rallied, and they decided that they were going to grow in this area 15%. The long story short is they put a plan together for 10% growth. They had 17.9% growth, if I remember correctly, 17.6, something like that, year one. And their bottom line grew almost the same proportion. Year two, I think it was a 15 or 16% growth. So when they redid their 5-year planning, they look at, wow, this puts us on pace for 125 million by 2030. So once it was their target and not the owners, once they saw how they could get there, once they took ownership of that number, people, when they set their own targets, usually achieve them or smash them. And they did it. So that's a big key to the great game, Nick, is that transfer of ownership. Instead of it being Larry's trucks and Larry's facility and Larry's this and Larry's that, because he's the owner, it was their truck. It was their facility. It were their clients, not the companies. That transfer of ownership in the great game is probably the biggest single factor of making it hugely successful or not. When we can successfully transfer that sense of ownership to the people, fantastic.
And then that sense of ownership, Kevin, that comes at different times for each company?
It comes at different time for each person.
Each person, I see.
Yeah, and each company, right?
Yeah.
And that also hinges on the leadership in companies, right? Nick, you're the restaurant manager, and a server comes up to you or a cook and asks you a question, and you, being the leader, okay, I should know the answer. I got to give them an answer. That addles their brains. That squashes entrepreneurial thinking, ownership thinking. All right. Once we at our company started answering questions with questions, that thinking started accelerating like a flywheel. So, server comes in and asks you, should I do my side work now or later? I don't know. What do you think? If you own the company, what would you do? If you were in my position, what would you think would be the right thing to do? That way they're not using and taxing your brain the rest of their lives. They're growing their own thinking. Did I give an example on that?
It's so powerful, because even though I think I do that at the agency, I think I also tend to go back to this, answering questions, and I got to stop myself and say, so yeah, you're right. The leadership is kind of the constraint in how fast or how slow the ownership transfers.
That's why when I do implementations, I have recognition. I have a leadership thing in there. I put some stuff in just because I think that's so key and so important in this process. Sure, we could set this up. Anybody with a profit and loss or income statement, no problem. But it's the people that are going to execute it. And how do we get that done best? Okay. We got to supply the people the tools to be great.